Here we are again. I've recorded one video today, something on Colossians 2, and I've made two, I guess what you would call episodes on a podcast, which is not really a program, but just a audio journal. It's called Jan Notes. You can find that on Anchor. It's also on Spotify, I think. So I just keep producing today. I'm sitting here by myself and I have these thoughts I want to share and make good use of my time. I've said at other places the whys and wherefores of what I'm doing and why. I've been wanting to do something with, to share chapter 11 of Hebrews. I know that you can go to other places and find someone reading the Bible and do it much better than I do. But there's something personal when you hear from a friend, and I'm reading to you, my friends and family. Truth through personality is the definition that Phillips Brooks gave to preaching. I've mentioned that before. Truth through personality. God can speak to us through our friends and family, even through a simple act of Bible reading, maybe with some comments and so on. I've shared at other places today that one of the reasons I choose to read the scriptures is because I don't simply trust my comments, especially topically on everything in life, but I'm going to be coming forward with some things about trauma and recovery in the future, and some doctrinal things as well. But here on Hebrews 11, it's a rather long chapter. I'm reading from the NIV today. Just one more word, as I do sometimes before reading. The book of Hebrews is a book about the righteousness of Christ, but especially about the superiority of Christ to some of the things that the early Christians were turning to in place of Jesus, or in addition to Jesus. Colossians had that issue, and we talked about that in Colossians 2. The understanding or the presence, however they were relating to angels, angelic beings, there was a problem in several of the churches, and I take it that Paul is mentioning that here too in Hebrews. But Paul says that, and I believe he was the author of Hebrews, Paul says that Jesus is superior not only to the angels but to Moses, that he has a superior priesthood and he is a superior sacrifice, and that this is what makes the new covenant a better covenant, because it is the coming of Christ as the fulfillment of the types and shadows of the Old Testament, and that we should leave many of those things behind, not because they were not good at the right time and place, but because this greater light has come, Jesus. The issue in this book is very much about who and what do we have faith in, and also about the dangers of giving up the faith. And so you have what is called the faith chapter of the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. The subtitle in this particular Bible version is called Faith in Action, and that sounds right. So let's read now, and if I feel impressed, I'll make a comment. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. By faith Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings, and by faith Abel still speaks even though he is dead. Well, you know that Cain was killed by his brother or rather Abel was killed by his brother Cain, who was jealous. We see this same act repeated today. There are many martyrs today. It also points to the necessity of faith within family relationships, and that you can have faith in a family that may indeed cost you sacrifice, even your own life. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. That's an Old Testament quote. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Just a little personal highlight there. I have always believed in God from the time of a little child. It's not a personal achievement or something that I can really personally brag about. It's simply the fact. I was raised in a Christian home, even though there was divorce and many things that you could not recommend. But my grandparents were godly individuals. I believe they prayed for me. I believe that I was dedicated to the Lord before I was born, and that was confirmed afterward. And many of my young memories are memories of church. When I was about 5 years old, I was playing outside the house on Lenox Place in Cincinnati. My grandfather and grandmother Poole. My mother had moved in with them within the first year of her divorce. I was, like I say, about 5 years old. I was playing outside in a tree, and my memory is that it's a larger tree, but I know in fact it was small, I'm sure. My little boy's mind. And I got hung up in the tree. My foot was caught in a fork, and I was hanging upside down, not far from the ground. And I prayed. I asked God to help me. And my foot loosened, and I fell, tumbled out really, onto the ground. I just remember it as a profound, not a profound feeling, it's just a simple faith of a little child, and I believed that he heard my prayer. I was a sensitive child, and later I struggled with guilt for stealing some things, as children sometimes do. I did. I thought I'd stolen from a church, turned out to just be an elaborate-looking house, but I had a sensitive conscience, and I was 8 or 9 years old before I was relieved of that by my mother explaining the forgiveness of God to me. I've done many bad things in my life, many ungodly things, but I've never doubted his existence. That's, again, not something to boast about, it's just true. That has not been a plague in my heart. I've doubted his power and strength for me. I've succumbed to shame and doubted that he would forgive me and many other things, but I haven't doubted his existence. And that's been a blessing to me. It's kept me from suicide more than once, actually, because I believe that he was there, and he rewards those who diligently seek him. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. By this faith he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. You should remember that Abraham lived in an idolatrous country. He was raised in an idolatrous family. What we now know, the area of Iran, which was Babylon at the time, the early Babylonian countryside. And God called that man to be the father of Israel. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children, because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and him as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and as countless as the sand on the seashore. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, and admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. That's a great hedge against idolatry, to remember that you are a foreigner and a stranger on earth. Don't be in love with these things. You can appreciate all the gifts that God has given. But we're heading somewhere else. Don't sink the anchor too deep. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. By faith, Abraham, when God testified, By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead, and so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones. Now remember, faith is evidence of things not seen, assurance about the future. And that's what we're experiencing here with these great stories of faith. They couldn't see them. The only assurance they had was the Word of God, and that's what they had faith in. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. They're closing up the park here, and I don't know if they'll come and make me move or not, but I'll continue on as we're losing light. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger, and he persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the application of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land, but when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell, after the army had marched around them for 7 days. By faith the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. That's the story of the fall of Jericho, by the way. She played a great part in. She was also part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Women received back their dead, raised to life again. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released, so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. Living in holes in the ground. Be careful how you despise the poor, if you despise the poor. Be careful if you look down on people because they lack material goods, as if they've been somehow unfaithful or unsuccessful. Be careful. They may be kings and princes in the kingdom of God. Princesses and queens. These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. And in 12:1, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders, and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Are you weary? Do you lose heart? Read this chapter. Read it again and again until you have faith. Luther was once asked, what do you do if you don't have faith? He says, you get faith. There is no other option. Without faith, it's impossible to please him. Whatsoever is not of faith is sin, the Apostle Paul said. Consider him, and that's where you find faith. Considering Jesus, who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. He is with you. He has promised you a reward. He will go through all of these life circumstances with you. Life is a trial. We see that. Story after story after story. Did you think that you would not have trials and tribulations? Have faith. Have faith and you'll make it. You'll be just fine if you put your faith in God. Not yourself, not the world, not political entities, nothing else. Consider him. Have faith in Jesus, and we'll be together in the end, in the kingdom come, in the heaven and earth made new. God bless you.